I'm going to share with you guys all the focus systems that's available for the Nikon Z6. Check this out. What's up guys, Myung here from Prodigy Studios, and I just wanted to do a quick video of the focus system that the Nikon Z6 has. It's kind of new, the way it's focusing compared to all the other cameras that I've seen out there, so there's a little bit of learning curve, so I'm going to go straight to it. Okay, so the first thing that's available for focus system for your Z6 is obviously the manual focus, right? So you could select the manual focus from the back, and this is of course the best method of focusing that you should learn when you're shooting video, because then you have full control of your focus and it's not gonna act strange. It's not gonna do something weird if you were to have it automatic, because you know there's no camera that's that perfect, right? So it's gonna be some errors here and there every once in a while. But if you want 100% guarantee that your subject is in focus, you definitely want to go to manual focus and have an external monitor on top, so that way you could really tell if it's in focus or not. Otherwise, you could turn on the focus peaking and you will see the outline, and that'll show you if it's in focus. And another way is to actually zoom in, and by pushing the plus button, the little magnifying plus button, and you could zoom in and then focus on your subject and then zoom right back out. But the flaw of that method is that when you focus in, there's a big lag of refresh rate. So if you are focusing, it takes about a second for the screen to adjust that focus, so it gets kind of tricky. It works, but it does get a little tricky, and so you just kind of have to get used to it, right? So besides that, if you are in automatic mode, most of the lens like this Tamron 35mm has a knob for focusing, autofocus, and manual focus. So you don't even have to turn on the manual focus in the back in case you were in autofocus. You could just simply turn this off, and then now you could just focus with your dial and focus on your subject properly. Okay, so next focus system that we should talk about is the full-time autofocus. And this is kind of cool. This is the Nikon's newest autofocus system, which is kind of exciting because it does a decent job of focusing on the person's face. They'll put a little square on top of it, and it does a good job on focusing on animals too, dogs, cats. And the cool thing about it is also that let's say you're shooting a wedding, right? And there's a bridal party, and it will actually find all the faces and it'll highlight a person's face. And you could actually use the D-pad to select different faces, just left or right, so that person has the priority of being in focus. So sometimes it's not the best focus system, right? Because I mean it's not perfect. It's a machine, it's not perfect. And every once in a while, like for example, my boy had a t-shirt with a simple smiley face and he thought that was a face, and it was using he kept focusing on that first before his face. But when something weird like that happens, the cool thing about the Nikon Z6 is you could simply tap on the screen. You could tap on a person's face, and once you tap on that person's face, it'll track that person's face. So if they're moving around left and right, it'll just keep following and keep that person in focus. So that's really cool. And then if you want to take that focus out, you just simply push OK, and then the cursor will go to the middle. And if you don't want to tap the screen, you could just simply push OK, and wherever your reticle is at, that's where it's gonna track and lock on the focus. So there's multiple ways of focusing on your subject in case your full-time autofocus doesn't work. And if for some reason that doesn't work, then I definitely want you to turn off the autofocus, go to manual, and then just dial it in. You know, because I mean, I shoot a lot of weddings, a lot of events, and you have to be just quick when it comes to focusing on your subject, or you just miss the whole moment, right? So you have to kind of act quick. You gotta full-time focus, then you could tap to focus, and all else fails, manual to focus on your subject. So the next autofocus system that we could talk about is the continuous autofocus. Now I have to admit I don't really use the autofocus continuous and autofocus single as much because it's not that intuitive, it's not that helpful. But just to let you guys know what it can do, because it is different. What the continuous does is that it focuses on your subject, and let's say that person is walking towards you, or they're kind of like moving left and right. If you, during recording, if you push the record button, or not the record button, but the shutter button halfway, then it starts the autofocus system. It'll turn on, and just hold it down, not all the way down, but halfway down. It'll focus on the subject, and it'll continually focus on the subject as they move around. And then you could let go if you want to stop that focus, or if that person stopped moving, right? So maybe you'll use it. I definitely don't end up using it. It's cool that it's there, but that's the continuous autofocus for the Nikon Z6. So let's talk about the single autofocus. This autofocus system is something I don't really use. It's not that intuitive, because what it does is, let's say you're focusing on your subject, right? And then you push the shutter halfway to get your focus. It will stop right when it focuses. So instead, if that person was to walk towards you, unlike the continuous, as it focuses continually as they walk, it'll just catch the focus, and then it'll stop the focus right there. And if they walk past again, then you lose it. Then you have to push the shutter halfway to focus on a subject, and then if they were to move again, then you lose it. So it's really good for maybe a static shot, maybe someone not really walking around and you want a subject from thing to thing, right? Maybe you're doing a depth of field rack focusing, right? So then you could then use that system, because you could tap on the subject number 2, then focus, by pushing halfway, and then it's done. So it's not really that intuitive for us videographers to use something like that, especially since most of us just use manual focus anyways. But it's there just in case you do want to use automatic focus, right? All right, so I just want to quickly talk about the focus areas. So the first one that's available is single point autofocus, and that's just a tiny little square, and you get to move it around with your D-pad and focus on your subject. So that's pretty much what that is. I end up using that a lot because of the fact that I want to make sure my focus is exactly where I want it to be. So it's very useful to have that exact point. So I like to use that a lot. And then the next one is wide area autofocus, and it just gets a little bit bigger. Simple. That's all that is. And then the wide autofocus, it gets a little bit wider, right? So I don't really like to use those, because it's like, what if there's 3 people just standing side by side? You know what I mean? Like, who are they gonna focus on first? I don't know, it's not really that useful to me, so I'll skip that one. But so then the 2 focus system I like to use is the auto area autofocus, and then the single point autofocus. Single point, you get full control. Auto area autofocus, you get to try to test out the Nikon Z6 and let the Z6 focus on the subject, which is very useful when you're using gimbal, because you can't really be focusing as you're using a gimbal, right? You kind of have to rely on your camera. So that every once in a while it does a good job, or most of the time it does a good job. But when it comes to a gimbal, I'd rather use a single point autofocus and have my subject in the middle. That way I know that whatever person is or thing is in the middle, that's what's going to be in focus. So for gimbals, kind of play around with both of them to see which one suits you best. So alright guys, that concludes my short little simple video about the focus system for the Nikon Z6. If you watched the whole video, thank you so much. Please hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.